Do you have an RV and know it's time to do your yearly maintenance on your wheel bearings before the problem becomes even bigger? I put this video together as a quick how-to reference for people who are mechanically inclined and want the step-by-step instructions of how to grease your 7,000-pound Dexter axles. I show you how to grease your wheel bearings, the difference between easy lube and standard axles, how to use a torque wrench to get the proper pressure in your wheel bearings, and how to change a wheel seal. Performing this yearly maintenance will keep your axles from turning into a big expensive repair bill. It will also keep your family safe while traveling on your next camping trip. So let's get into it. Hi, I'm Steve of the Radar Road Warriors. And just like you, I found lots of conflicting information and the proper maintenance procedures for my wheel bearings. I was also frustrated, so I dug through the manufacturer's website and did some research to put this video together for you. We travel on a 41-foot fifth wheel, just at the 12,000 mile mark on our RV, so it's time to do some maintenance on wheel bearings. We're making this video to help you out so you don't have to do all the research like I did. Don't just take the information off some dude on YouTube for maintaining your RV. You always want to check with the manufacturer, in this case the Axle's website, to verify the information. I'm not a licensed mechanic. If you need information from a licensed mechanic, you want to seek one of those people out. That way you can verify the information and the resources. I'm going to quickly answer some of your questions. How often do I need to maintain my wheel bearings? Well, it's every year or 12,000 miles. Also, make sure you inspect your wheel bearings before every trip and keep an eye on them during the trips. Can I use a power grease gun? The answer to that is no. Dexter specifically says in their manuals, do not use a power grease gun. Doing so, you'll possibly blow out the seal on the back of your hubs, and that will cause grease to be all over the brakes, which will reduce your ability to stop when you're driving down the road. There are a lot of grease options. What do I use? Now, there are a lot of grease options out there, and you cannot mix different grease compounds. On Dexter's manual, they will list different options that you can use for your grease, but once you have one grease, stick with that grease unless you clean all the old stuff out and are starting over. What I use is a red and tacky grease, just like Dexter uses. I buy it from Tractor Supply. It's their store brand. When you're looking at the grease in the store, you can read on the cartridges. It'll give you specifications of what each grease is used for. And on the cartridge, you will see trailer service, high temperature, high pressure type of grease. So cheaper the grease is cheaper grease. The higher dollar grease will get you better quality grease, keep you traveling down the road. Now those are your main questions. Let's get into the inspection. For the inspection, you need a couple tools. Some way to lift up the axle, that way you can rotate and check on the tire. You're also going to need some way to look in the back of the axle to look at the seal. I have an inspection camera that'll sync up to my phone for this. When you're jacking up on the axle, you can look up different ways of jacking your axle. I use underneath of the spring. Other options are on the frame. Always make sure your RV is supported somehow. We have a 6-point leveling system, so that is supporting the weight when I'm jacking up on this axle. When you jack up the axle, you will look at the tire. You will shake it back and forth. If you notice a lot of play in that tire, that means your wheel bearings are loose, need to be retorqued and serviced. When you're looking on the back of the axle through your camera, you're looking at the point where the seal meets onto the spindle. That is where one part spins on the other. If you see a lot of grease that is flowing all over the place, that means your seal is leaking, needs to be replaced. If you see it looks nice and clean, you can see one piece meeting the other without a bunch of grease all over the place, your seal is in good shape and intact. When you're jacking up on your axle, you want to jack up on the spring, not on the axle tube. If you jack on the axle tube, you can bend your axle and cause some more problems. Now let's get into performing some maintenance. A nice piece of cardboard down here helps a lot when you're working. I happen to find this on top of the recycling container, so I dug it out of there. I think I'm known as the dumpster diver in this campground because that was 2 days in a row I had to go into the dumpster for something. The first time I threw something away by accident, I had to retrieve it, but it was on top of the pile. If you want to know if you have easy lube bearings or standard bearings, you can usually tell by looking at the outside of your wheel. You'll have a little cap you can remove in the center. You can pop it out with a flathead screwdriver. Inside of that, you'll see a little rubber plug. It usually says easy lube on it if it's a factory piece. If it doesn't, you can pull the rolling rubber plug out with a flathead screwdriver. You look inside of there, you'll see a grease zerk. A grease zerk is what the grease gun goes onto. If it has a grease zerk on there, it is easy lube, and that means you can repack your wheel bearings without having to disassemble the whole operation. If you do not see the grease zerk on there, you have standard axles. Easy Lube axles came out in spring of 2002, so pretty much most RVs that are newer are going to have the Easy Lube axles. Older ones will have the standard axles. If you want to verify, you can do it just like this. Our next step, we're going to retorque the wheel bearings. You jack up the tire, remove the wheel, we'll pull off a dust cap, and we will retorque the bearings. The rubber gloves come in handy for this, so you don't have to get grease all over your RV when you're trying to go in to wash them up. When you pull the dust cap off, I use a pair of pliers to pull it off. Make sure you do that gently so you not bend your dust cap in the process. There is going to be a little clip on the outside of the Easy Lube axles. You take a flathead screwdriver, pry it off. It just snaps on the outside. Move it over to somewhere clean. I have it on my piece of cardboard over here. Now you have a nut on the outside. You should be able to move this nut by hand. For retorquing the bearings, I will use a torque wrench. You loosen the nut up, and I will set the torque wrench to 50 foot-pounds. Rotate the tire during the process. When it gets to 50 foot-pounds, you will stop rotating the tire, loosen up the nut, finger tighten the nut, put the clip back on, and then you can grease it to do your yearly maintenance. After you have put the clip and the nut back on, you always want to be able to move it, just a little wiggle on there, so it should have a little bit of tension, not be too tight and not too loose. To change the wheel seal, you have to pull the hub off. So you will take the clip off, remove the nut. There's a washer behind the nut. Your outer bearing is behind that. Sometimes you have to release some pressure off the brakes to pull the hub off. Make sure when you're pulling off the hub, you have a rag or something over the outside, so when the bearing comes off the end, you don't drop it down into the dirt. That was a little bit of a pain to get the seal out. I carefully bent and broke the old seal so I could pry it out of there. They do make a seal puller. I'll link one down below if you want to find something to make your job easier. Let me show you why I like National seals a little better. This is a seal that came out. This is a Dexter seal, came in from factory. And on the back side, it is hollow. It is still a double lip seal, but has less metal to hold the seal in place. On the National seal, you'll see metal on one side, metal on the other, on a double lip seal. The National seal is going to be much stronger to keep the grease in and dirt and contaminants out. After you pull out the old seal, you need to clean the surface where your seal goes back into the hub. You can use a little bit of brake cleaner to clean off a little bit of residue in there. Make sure you get any of the old sealant out so you have a clean metal surface. Make sure you clean off any grease that's left over on the brakes. I use a regular brake and parts cleaner for this. You can clean off the spindle with the same brake and parts cleaner so everything is a new surface before you put grease and new seals on. When you're installing your seal, you will see on both sides of the seal, one side has a little spring on it. The spring side goes in towards your bearings. When you're installing a new seal, it's very important that it's installed evenly and flush all the way around. Use a block of wood and go slow and keep checking. You'll want a nice coat of grease around where the bearings go on, a little bit where your seal is going to ride so nothing's going to start off dry. And after I do some on here, I will do some right around the inside of the seal. When you're putting the hub back on, be careful not to damage the seal by hitting it on the spindle. Put it on carefully and tap it over the brakes. After your hub is on, you'll put the outer bearing back in place. Then you'll put the washer on. You'll see a flat side on one side. It only goes on one way. And then you tighten the nut finger tight before you get ready to torque the bearing down. Torquing your bearings is the same whether you're doing your maintenance intervals or you just took the hub off, replace the seal, and putting your bearing back on. So we'll use the same 50 pounds, rotate it, make sure we back the nut off when we're done, and put a retainer on. If you're picking up some tips or you learned something, please give this video a like, and also get into greasing the wheel bearing so we can put it all back together. Remember, when you're greasing the wheel bearings, always rotate the drum as your tire is jacked up. That allows time for the grease to flow through the bearings. You will see it start coming out on this end. Once you see grease out to this end, you have all the grease in there, you're good to go. If you're doing a repacking through your Easy Lubes, you would put new grease in. You'll see some older, black, discolored grease coming out. You will keep pumping, keep turning, until you get the new fresh grease out on the end, and then you have cleared out the old grease and repacked your bearings through the Easy Lube system. I wouldn't normally have to take the tire off, remove everything for an inspection and greasing the hubs, but I found I had bad seals on the back by doing the proper inspection, so it took a little bit longer by having to take the tire, the hub off, replace the seal, but now I know it is done properly. I'm not going to have grease all over my brakes. I'll be able to stop properly driving down the road. Now to be clear, I use an impact gun for taking tires off, and I use it for spinning the lug nut snug back up. After I use this, I will use the torque wrench in sequence. I will start at 25 pounds per lug nut, then up to 60, and then to the 120 final torque. Everything is properly torqued on the tire. I will check this as I travel during our get out and look stops to make sure everything is still holding its proper torque over the next couple hundred miles. Remember, when you are torquing, never go around in a circle, always use a star pattern. They give you instructions and a diagram inside a Dexter manual for that. You'll find links to the products we talked about in the description down below this video. If you want to see more how-to videos like this, YouTube is going to link one up here right now. Why don't you check it out, and we'll see you in the next video.